Hello, hello, hello. This is really energizing music. I put a bit more, Gene.
Yeah, you need
Thank
in this week.
you.
You need pretty like moving music for you to be
This
happy,
is
right?
this is amazing. This is the best music we ever had in the community call. Hello, guys. How are you? Welcome, everyone, to the 2 of April 2026. Hello, Gene. Hello, Juan. How are you guys?
Doing great. It's
Very great.
maybe trying times for DeFi, but we still need to do our part to make it work, right?
That's what we have been doing for all these years. We will. I mean, the thing is that last week I presented a certification approach for DeFi, and now this week I'm going to present the same thing because sometimes you need to repeat the message as many times as necessary for the world to listen. But first, we have Juan here, treasury manager at Kleros, to explain to us. A bit what happened this week with Aave and all of these protocols that are connected to Aave and all of these assets around Aave. Yeah, I mean, explain to us as if we were like 10-year-old people what is happening, and please make no mistakes.
Perfect, perfect. Uh, yeah, it was a tough weekend, like for people that is like 100% to DeFi, like a no sleep weekend. Basically, because we saw one of these things that maybe you can consider a Sigma or a Black Swan event in DeFi. And what happened is, you know that Aave is the biggest lending protocol like on chain, like the historically like what's considered maybe the safer. At least internally, we have a different perception on that on how we measure risk. And why? Because when you lend money, like you lend money to earn yield. And how do you earn yield? Well, someone is taking that money that you lend. So for taking that money, they leave collateral. In Aave, for example, they have a pooled model. That means all people lend their money to a same pool, and that pool is lent to people that have another collateral as guarantee as they deposit. Okay. In other models, for example, you only lend to the assets you feel comfortable with. Aave, for capital efficiency, says, okay, I curate, I decide which are the assets with my governance that enter this pool, and all these assets can be eligible to borrow against it. So you have Bitcoin, you have Ethereum, and then like how DeFi evolves, you start having another type of assets, so derivatives of Ethereum, so liquid state tokens like Lido, or other iterations of Bitcoin, or stable coins that make yield, or for example, in this case, another liquid restake token that emerged with the restaking mania. That, if you remember, it's like an additional step of the proof of stake, but with not much utility today. Anyways, like this additional competitor to Lido, let's say, that is called Kelp, was a very big protocol, like with a lot of security constraints in some aspects, and very solid. And people that hold this because they want to expose to ETH and they trust the protocol can borrow against this in Aave. It has a very big size. And this asset that you can have in your wallet that gives you exposure to ETH and yield, you can bridge it to other chains. So you can bridge it to layer 2s, for example, to Unichain, Arbitrum, and Mantle, etc. When you bridge to to another chain, you have different options. You can go like we are the official bridge, the canonical bridge, but the bad thing about that is that you need to wait 7 days, like to get it back to layer 1, where like the asset lives. Okay, or you can use another providers like layer 0. That personally I like them a lot. And then when you use these providers, you need to do a custom integration. For example, when you integrate in Kleros and you want to create your case or use some code of ours, you can go to our documentation and see all the technical aspects, and you can see William recommendations like for how many jurors, even how much money is procured. Work here is the same. If you're going to create a bridge for your token, you have the documentation, you have like the ideal specs for how this should be done. And what
So it's
happens?
basically it's a
Yeah.
third party solution, right, to the UX issue of the like, canonical option, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's a third-party solution that is likely more capital efficient, and it's way more easy to integrate in all chains because you have a same version on all chains, and it's a very battle tested. Like Layer Zero is one of the biggest company in the space, uh, and I really like them. But in the documentation, and they say like, and okay, we don't recommend a one of one. Let's say multi, like to make it simple, like multi-sig to do the most important thing, that is when you bridge from Ethereum to a layer 2, for example, you lock the token, let's say the official token on Ethereum, and you create a new version on the layer 2, so you always have backing for that version. And the same, when you go back, you burn the version on layer 2 to get back the tokens in layer 1. Okay, what happened is that when you set up this, you say, okay, for doing the mint and burn, you need someone that verifies this, and it's what is called a DVN. And basically, they put like a one of one, only one person, let's say, to verify this. And what happens? Like layer zero documentation says it's not ideal. The same that in Kleros Treasury, if we manage like certain amount of assets, we don't have a one of one multi-sig, but we have a higher threshold. And here is the same. And what happened is that when this
One
is,
on one multisig is like it's not really a multisig, or I mean, the point of a multisig is having more, right?
yeah, exactly,
Signers.
exactly.
Okay.
Like it's more like, yeah, it's like the amount of like people that will need to fail to verify, in this case, the breach. I'm explaining very simple, but yes, exactly.
Mhm.
That's why, like when you, in this case, when you breach an asset like from layer 2 to layer 1, and this party, like that you said, the DVN sets this and says, okay, you have burned this asset in layer 2, so I can
Mhm.
release the tokens that correspond to you in layer 1. And what happened is that and this, like, kelp, these projects have this configuration one of one. Then there's a discussion of if layer 0 approved that or not, and anything like who's to blame for this, but it's another discussion. So this DVM was hacked, and what it meant is that the asset that was on layer 2 wasn't burned, but the message that sent to the layer 1, they was, yes, this was burned, you can release the respective ETH on layer 1 on Ethereum. So what ended up happening is that they release like a receipt that didn't correspond according to the real assets backing the token. So more assets went on chain, and this enabled the attacker, who got free assets of around, I don't know, I think like 300 million, to go to Aave and borrow against those free assets he got a lot of money, a lot of money. So it was like, imagine 300 million, and he did in several chains. So he used these assets that he could get for free, let's say, to borrow USDC real assets like USDT, USDC, ETH, and basically generate in Aave a potential scenario of what's called bad debt. That bad debt is if you're lending money against the collateral of someone, if that collateral in some moment is worth less than what you have lent, basically your loan that you gave could be defaulted. So this had never happened in Aave because the collateral accepted were very limited and constrained. But this was a failure on the asset issuer that was accepted in Aave, or on the bridging layer. So it's a gray area, and this enabled that many people, like a lot of panic, fear, etc., and many like secondary effects. For example, if you have a strategy on Aave that you were borrowing USDT with Brab stake ETH, so nothing to do with this asset, you're not impacted directly. So your due diligence was perfect, everything, but what happens is that the rates are so crazy that you start losing money because you're paying a lot to borrow. And or another scenarios that this fear spread across all DeFi because people were exiting, swapping positions, selling certain assets. And we all know that when there is panic and extreme fear, especially when the safest protocol in the whole history of DeFi gets hacked, it's a mess. So the protocol was frozen. People wasn't able to do anything like on Aave, and this generated more panic. And yeah, basically, the things are yet to be seen how to be resolved,
Mm.
because someone needs to bear the loss. Could be assets of the holders of these assets in layer two, could be in layer one, could be partially people of Aave. Let's see. I say Aave because it's mainly people on Aave that got affected by this because the attacker borrowed on Aave. And yes, like if the issue was that no one checked that this asset issue and that small detail, but very important, did have the one-of-one configuration that basically was very risky. Not sure if that was a relatively simple explanation.
I I'm trying to think how I will explain this later after the call to my aunt Rosita, who lives in Kurusukuatia. And I need to think exactly what metaphors I'm going to use. She when she doesn't have any money because of her pension being delayed, because of delays in payments, government stuff. So she goes to the pawn shop and she has a gold thing that she has for it, and then puts there, gives this to the pawn shop, and then she gets. This costs 100, and she gets 50. I don't know, or 30. What you're saying is that someone went to the Aave pawn shop and put some collateral, and then borrowed money against that collateral, as my aunt Rosita does when she's out of money, right? But with her gold, kind of jewelry, and
Yeah, exactly.
but with 300 million
But the
jewelry, let's call it.
collateral is like, it's like the imagine that you have you can put gold as collateral as guarantee,
Hmm.
and the jewelry accepts gold because they are very good checking gold. But
Hmm.
like your aunt, your grandma finds a way to like just create fake gold, like that is worthless.
Mm.
So basically, he left the fake gold. She took she left the fake gold that the jewelry thinks that worth 100. She took 70, and when she took it and she already left the country, so she already have the cash, the jewelry realized, oh, this is worthless. Like it's fake gold. It's
Mm.
worth $1 and not $100. So I gave her 70. It's worth one. Like I have some insolvency scenario. So that's basically what's happening.
And maybe
Okay.
let's say too, if you could
Yeah, go ahead.
expand the analogy, maybe there this pawn shop had also the option for people to have like some credit with them, where they could even borrow even more. And now they realized that they accepted fake gold. These people that had credit, they don't have credit anymore. Their assets are gone, so they they, they lost money. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also there is another thing, Gene, that I'm not sure that this is well captured in this like DeFi example. Like my aunt, when she goes to the pawn shop, the guy from the pawn shop knows who she is, and if she were to go with fake gold, not 300 million, but $500 of fake gold, then the guy would go and tell you, "Oh, you know what Rosita did? She brought this thing to me, and this was a fake thing." She would lose like a lot of reputation in the community. She wouldn't be accepted in the local club anymore. She cannot go to play buraco or bridge with her friends. So like there is a lot of penalties that affect her. But I understand this is not how it works, Juan, in Ave, because they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about reputation, right?
Exactly, like the whole premise of Aave and works the same in Morpho, but and other competitors depending again the assets. But in Aave, for example, they don't care about this. Aave before will enable to do KYC, so I know who this guy is. But in the normal version, like the actual monetary constraint that says you he's borrowing way less money that he's leaving as collateral, and I can
Hmm.
always make sure that I remove his collateral when it's worth. If he borrow 50, I can remove his collateral when it's worth 60, and I sell it. So I make this difference, and I'm making sure that people that lend money whole. Like that monetary constraint of being able to liquidate people, and is what enables that you don't care about reputation. But in this case, if from one moment to another you realize that it's worth zero, okay, that rule evaporates. So yeah.
I have a question,
Cool.
Juan.
Yeah.
Just what do you think about the listing processes of collateral? Because I saw that some people were saying that maybe there were some conflict of interests.
Well,
Do you think it will be? Is there any way that it could have been avoided? Because maybe will be the next topic
yeah,
of
yeah.
the talk, right?
I mean, I have this. I fell in love with it because I remember when we first entered, we discussed about this, and the thing is, sometimes the more it's very difficult to sell this because it adds complexity layer, and for the people that has skin in the game, they don't win money with this. But yeah, I do think like the governance, for example, in Aave, you have a fuel proposal or like governance process to say, okay, I accept this collateral, and they have risk monitors. For example, in Kleros, I make the analysis of the risk and together with Clement, and we like decide the same in DAM. And in Aave, like the risk is shared publicly, and people accept or vote yes, I accept this collateral or not. But first, people are not incentivized always to like to do the full due diligence besides the people that are paying to do that. And second, like it can happen that you post a proposal and you say, I accept this collateral because it's very deep liquidity, it has deep parameters, etc. But after the asset is accepted, like that could completely change. Like you could have this one of one multisig at the moment of like creating the proposal for accepting it could be a 5 of 5, so completely secure, and maybe 1 week later change it. And except someone is like very concrete, have an incentive to look into that, is hard to follow. So basically, I feel that adding some like skin in the game, like to actually like create this, like and is some of the things we spoke with Fortunato. I know you will talk about is like pretty good. We just need to, you just need to have the opportunity to prove it. Because if not, like you have a lot of conflict of interest of people making the reviews and getting paid for that are also entitled to the other assets that want to get into the protocol, so there could be conflict of interest. And if you have very objective policy of what's accepted and what not, and that could be mitigated.
Juan, one last question because I have to go. Just one thing, like, who has an incentive in this system to allow for a more like loose collateral acceptance regime, and who would prefer like a more strict collateral? I mean, decision. I mean, only very secure assets to become collaterals.
Well, I guess we hope that the whole industry wants only like strict collateral, but like the loose collateral probably is on the incentive side of the asset issuer or the users of this asset issuer. Why? Because they are taking certain risk and they want to be able to borrow in an efficient way in the biggest protocol, in this case Aave, against that asset. So asset that would mean like entering to very deep liquidity at good rates that maybe they cannot get on our side. So that's to get enlisted. And on the other side, you want like the users of Aave, like the users of Aave, if what scared the most that if they were using Aave is because it's the most resilient protocol and they're winning maybe less yield, but they don't need to think out the risk. So on the other side, you have the final user, and kind of the job of the risk manager is kind of balance both, and say, okay, I accept this collateral and I enable to keep the protocol growing while being secure. So you have those two parts conflicting. And obviously, if you have like the risk managers, I have no idea, like I have no way to prove that there is a conflict of interest, so I don't know. But if you have one of these at the same time having a parallel relationship with it, like with the asset issuer, it could generate problems. So you need to be very cautious and like specific on what's accepted and what not.
Juan, thank you very much. I guess we have more time to discuss these topics. Sometimes I get some people that come to me and tell me, I found this new like way of having more yield with no extra risk. And I typically say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that if I study what you are telling me closely, I will say that you found a way to have more yield at more risk, And they always invent like different names about that. But it's at the end of the day, it's like a different name for more leverage on the same pool of assets. That's what I found over
Always
the
that you have
years.
more yield is extremely likely that you have more risk. But even if you are accepting more yield, you need to understand where it comes from and how it's structured. So it doesn't mean that good higher yield is bad. You just need to make sure that you're understanding the risk and you're willing to take. And what we always say is that the perceived risk of that extra yield is smaller. Like if your perceived analyst risk from that extra yield is smaller than the yield itself, okay, good to go maybe, but you need to understand the position. Like not always good decisions take to good results. Sometimes bad results mean good decisions and vice versa. Sometimes good decisions mean bad results. You just need to make sure that you are doing like all the process to understand it and see what these edge cases could result in.
But this is the thing I never can explain to Rosita, because I mean she in her town, like she knows that the bank receives deposits from people in the town and then gives this money to as loans to people who want to open like to buy a car for like being Uber, or do like a little like a shop or whatever. And she understands that the bank pays 100 for the deposit and then collects 120 for the loan that recover. But then it's harder for me to explain this in the DeFi industry because it's way more complex. And I don't need you to explain this now because there's no time, but we can make a special community call where we discuss this. We explain DeFi for Rosita, we can call it.
Yeah, no issues. Like I would love to. Like we can explain a very basic scenario and like show some images. And yeah, like the core thing is that in DeFi you basically try to ensure that with smart contracts and like no reputation that is replaced by money. But sometimes if money fail, and the premise of Kleros is that smart contracts is not always black or white, it's sometimes gray. So yeah, and you need to be able to see that. So yeah, happy to do it and a pleasure to be on the guys. And yeah, people stay watching this. That is pretty cool, and we actually have some examples of these decentralized certifications with the future of DeFi. I have just sent you here that maybe you can share, Shin, like the article that we explain kind of this. So yeah, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, let's get started. I will give you a short presentation. I mean, I already gave this presentation, but it seems that, the message needs to be spread more and more because this keeps happening. And we were discussing right now about conflict of interest in what assets to accept as collaterals in DeFi protocols. And this is topic where we think that Kleros can provide a good service in the sense of Kleros as a curation and certification tool for lots of different things. Let me, as I always like, is to tell you a bit about history, because nothing that we do at Kleros we invent. We basically steal from the Greek. In this case, we stole this idea from the early days of the capitalism and the joint stock companies. In the 17th century, we have this new way of organizing the economy. We have this new joint stock companies where many people can buy stocks of companies and then be partners in like a more important organization that will produce profits for everyone. And the stocks in the early days were traded in this place, was called the Royal Exchange. It was in London, and in that time it was the East India Company, and all of that was the most important company of joint stock. The first one, basically after the Dutch one, was also the Dutch East India Company. Well, but the point is that in that royal stock, people would buy and sell all sorts of things, wool, like wheat, cereals, whatever. And in one corner you have the traders of stocks doing buying and selling. And at some point, the King William III, he considers that this stock trading was a speculative matter, and they want to cut down on speculation. And then they basically ban brokers from the Royal Exchange. And so what these guys do, of course, they're not going to stop their trade just because the king is banning them. So they just go on the street and they start working in a place called Change Alley. And well, you can imagine why it's called Change. It's on the city of London. And last year, when I went to London for the conference we did at King's College, I took the time to actually go to Change Alley and take some pictures there. And then this is what it looks like now. It's like a back alley where you would imagine people go to buy, I don't know, drugs. Well, in that time, people would go there to trade stocks because it was kind of, well, it was not illegal per se, but it was kind of a gray area activity, not very well regulated because government would not participate in the regulation. And at some point, the traders, since winter in London, I mean, the weather in London is not perfect. So they decided, okay, instead of being on the street, let's maybe go to a more comfortable place. And they end up going to a coffee house called Jonathan. And this is the place where I would say the modern stock exchange was born. And these traders start to make rules about how to collect, assets, how to make payments, and lots of different regulations that were basically agreements for traders who were operating in that coffee shop. And those rules end up being very sophisticated in the sense of even enabling very complex transactions, including like futures, including options, including all of the basically modern transactions you see on modern financial markets were in some way or another already present in the Jonathan Coffee House. And there is this famous book by a guy called Thomas Mortimer called Every Man His Own Broker that explains how the system worked and how the rules worked and how if some trader would default on their debt and not pay, they would be ostracized from the stock house and they were unable to keep trading. So all of this system was in place in the 18th century, and only like 1 century after that, only then the parliament start becoming involved and start making the first public rules to regulate a system of private regulation that was already developed by the traders. Okay, and if you want to learn more about this, I recommend this excellent book. I recommend this to everyone I meet, basically everywhere, called Private Governance, Creating Order in Economic and Social Life by Ed Stringham. He explains in a number of chapters lots of different instances of private regulation that were made by the market, in this case, the London Stock Exchange, but then others are, for example, how eBay developed their system for dispute resolution between buyers and sellers. So this is a great book if you are into these topics. This introduction is not just for you to know that I read about the London Stock Exchange in the early days. It's also because there are many similarities between the DeFi industry and the early days of financial markets in London. And the thing is that we are seeing growing number of crypto assets made worldwide, from very few in 2013 to millions now, and this is already an old chart. And so we are having this exponentially growing curve of crypto assets that are being issued, and the regulation capacity of governments is growing a bit because of better tools, more technology, but it doesn't grow as fast as the amount of assets that are being issued every day in this new global crypto economy. And there is this tweet I saw, I think last year, by Brian Armstrong, the founder of Coinbase, where he says that we are in a situation where we are having almost 1 million new assets per week, which is like a mind-boggling thing, impossible to follow by traditional regulatory frameworks. And this is where Kleros can work very well. And this is where Kleros, in particular, the Kleros curation approach, can be a good way to certify lots of different things that could make DeFi way more secure for everyone to use. Remember, this is a system, financial system that is made by people who are from different countries. I mean, jurisdictions are from everywhere. This is a system where you don't even know who the participants are because you have like users who are just a Ethereum address, so you don't know, you don't have a reputation for them. So this is completely different world, and a world for which the conventional public regulatory regimes was not, thought of, right? So a few years ago, 2019, we launched this app called Tokens, and this was a system that could be used to vet tokens, to verify tokens based on rules that one would expect those tokens to comply with. And the system was a community-driven approach for verifying if tokens complied or not with those rules. And this is a mechanism we developed that works in the following way. You have Alice who wants to have her token listed into an exchange, and then she submits, she sends a form with the relevant information about her token, and then she makes a deposit, which is going to act like as a bounty for people to take the time to verify the submission. If nobody has any objection to this token being listed because they think it complies with the rules, so the token now is accepted, and the deposit she made is sent back to her and she recovers her deposit. Okay? But what if now she wants to submit a token that is not compliant because of whatever reason? Maybe it's like a scam. And then she makes the submission, she makes a deposit. Now Bob thinks as this token should not be allowed into the list. So he challenges the submission and he also puts another deposit as a bounty. And now you have a situation of a dispute between Alice, who claims that the token complies with the rules, Bob, who claims it doesn't comply, and then you will have a panel of Kleros jurors who are going to evaluate the evidence and decide who is right. And let's say that the jury decides that Bob was right and that the token was not compliant, so the token is rejected, and Bob gets Alice's deposit. So this is an incentive that he gets because for like taking the time and the risk of verifying the submissions and challenging them. Okay. There is a very famous case that happened in this app that involved this project called Buyer Chain. This was a project that they made the submission and then someone from the community challenged it because there was something that didn't smell good in this project, because the CTO, a guy called Scott Bingley, he, in the white paper, the guy was mentioning that he was part of an Oxford blockchain group, laboratories or something like that. But people started to become suspicious because for a guy who claimed to be the CTO of an important project, there was no track record of like YouTube talks, no record of like papers. So something didn't smell good in this. And so jurors called Oxford to see if this guy actually was connected to Oxford or not. And what happened is that they picked up the phone at Oxford and they answered, we have no idea who Scott Bingley is, and there is no such thing as a Oxford blockchain laboratories here. It turned out that it was all a fake thing. It was like this guy didn't exist. It was just someone took like a photo from stock photos from the internet and put this name, invented a CV, and invented everything about Oxford, and then started the project like that. And lots of people actually bought with and those tokens, and those people got scammed. Oh, by the way, if you call Oxford about Kleros, they will actually answer to you that they know us, because if you are going to be around Oxford June 9, we are going to make a conference there about Kleros and law and Kleros and computer science, because we have a bunch of 2 PhD students who are going to, who are studying their different topics about Kleros. So if you want to participate, we will very soon, make the page where you can sign up. Just let me close this window. But yeah, they do know about Kleros at Oxford. But the point is that after a few months, after this was rejected from the registry because it was basically a fake token. The police in China, they make a number of arrests into a project called Bear Chain because it was classified as a Ponzi scheme by the police department. So, and this took like 6 months after the project was rejected from Kleros registry. And well, think how many people got scammed because of the time it took to the authorities to figure out this. That was figured out way sooner by Kleros jurors. Okay, so that was the first time we took this approach to certifying assets through like a list of community curation. And then the year after this, we partner with the Maker Foundation to do a joint research project called the Kleros and Maker Fellowship. In that time, the Maker Foundation was trying to think about how they could increase the assets that could be collaterals to the DAI stable coin. And well, one of the things they had to solve is, how do we make sure that assets that are going to be accepted as collaterals are going to be compliant or secure enough to be acceptable collaterals for the stable currency. If, of course, you can imagine if you start accepting any shitcoin as a collateral or any asset as a collateral, and then at some point you need to liquidate that. Your stable coin is going to be under collateralized and it's not going to stay stable for long. As we saw in a number of instances, in one of them very big in the crypto industry. And so the question that we wanted to answer with them was, okay, we want to make a list of assets that are going to be accepted as collaterals for the DAI. And these assets need to comply with 3 main categories. So if you want your asset to be a collateral, acceptable as a collateral, you need it to be accepted in this list. And if it enters this list, it will earn a badge called the Maker Badge. And then if it has a Maker Badge, it is acceptable as a collateral for the DAI. And it had to comply with 3 things. First, like the code considerations, the asset should have the right type of audits and all other security measures about the code. Then it had to comply with some risk profile, like not being like too volatile or other considerations. And then a legal aspect. For example, back then people were thinking of, for example, having to using real estate properties as collateral. So people wanted to tokenize a real estate asset, and then this asset becoming a collateral for the DAI and this crypto asset. So in a situation where that asset would have to be liquidated, what is the possibility of actually doing that? If you have this token that represents a house in some, part of Argentina, and then these tokens need to be liquidated, the underlying asset, this house, first, does it exist? Or is it a token representing nothing? And second, even if the house exists, can this house be liquidated in the real world? Can it be sold? Can the family living there be evicted if you need to sell the token to another property owner and then they want to use the house? So lots of questions like that. So you wanted to make sure that any house that would be acceptable as collateral first comply with the logic of, okay, if this needs to be liquidated, it can actually be liquidated in the real world. It's not just a fiction. Okay, so these were the type of questions that we asked ourselves in this type of research, and we wanted to understand what were the rules that an asset had to comply in order to be acceptable. And think of this in the context of potentially millions and millions of assets and combinations could be part of the collateral of the DAI, in the sense that, okay, you could have bonds or you can have stocks, but stocks from what country? In the NASDAQ or in the French index or in the Japan? All of them are valid or not. So there are lots of different situations that could potentially be collaterals, and you need a very big community of people to be able to curate all this. Okay, and the idea that I think this is becoming very relevant following what has just happened is that first you have a number of assets that want to be onboarded as DAI collateral. I mean, everyone wants their asset to be acceptable as DAI collateral, right? So there will be first like a filter where you will have a Kleros curated registry that where the community would analyze all of submissions and decide which of them complied with the code, legal, and risk profiles in order to be acceptable as DAI collaterals. And then there will be a vote that will be done in the maker community that would decide which of those would actually be accepted and included and onboarded into the DAI collateral list. So the important thing is that this first filter would avoid that the decision of the collateral to be taken only through the governance process, where you would have lots of interests of different actors, some of them pushing for, oh, we want this coin to be listed, we want this one, because, of course, depends of what people have in their bags, they will want different assets to be listed. And this can turn a technical decision into like a contest for popularity of the token, right? Because if you have lots of people who have interest in one asset to be listed, maybe that asset doesn't have the right risk profile to be listed, but it will still pass the governance process. So this is like a governance attack, if you want to call it that way. So if you have an objective test before this going to the governance process, then you will have, I believe, and we thought at that point, a way better onboarding system, and at the end of the day, a way more secure the DeFi ecosystem. Okay, and the conclusions of this report were presented by Marvin Colby. He's the person who was chosen to do the fellowship to do this research. And there is a video that you can just Google, and it's on YouTube, where he presents how the system should work and how and what the rules should be for different assets to be acceptable as collaterals. I do recommend everyone who is interested in DeFi and the future of DeFi, and especially if you are into this type of decisions of collateralizing different protocols, to look at this, because this mechanism, I think, is what basically the industry needs at this point to start creating a more serious listing process and a more transparent listing process, and something that looks a bit more like the traditional finance listing process, but still driven by the community and not by centralized gatekeepers. Okay, but the way in which this industry has been operating and working so far, I don't think this is working, and I don't think it's going to work in the future. So some of the ideas that are already into this idea of the tokens and this community verification system are already at work at Kleros and a product called Scout. And we will maybe let Fortunato, who is the product manager for all of this vertical, to tell us a bit more about this. So thank you very much. And hopefully the industry will learn some of the lessons from what happened in the past and what is happening now, and we will at the end be able to scale DeFi in a more secure way. So thank you very much. And Fortunato, you want to come? And Jean.
Hey,
well.
hey, hello everyone. Yeah, Federico, you said that it feels like you are repeating these concepts, but the more we see certain events happening, the more we realize the importance of verifying and certifying, especially in a world where assets or whatever kind of assets, not just DeFi, multiply in a insane scale. So yeah, this is something that it's important to repeat, in my opinion.
I will repeat it as many times as necessary. Yeah.
One thing about that, I think it would have been nice to ask Juan, but I think at some point for some time DeFi was maybe so profitable that the yields and the airdrops and the incentives kind of compensated the risks, the extra risks that you had. And now that there is the industry is on a more mature phase, and people are starting to care a bit more about security and the quality of the assets. And the idea is also to have banks and other funds to use DeFi. So maybe a couple of years ago, maybe that was kind of not the priority for DeFi, but now if the protocols don't care about that, maybe it's kind of existential for it to continue to be a viable.
Well, Gene, when people are making money through leverage, I mean, the people who are warning about the risk are going to be seen as the party poopers as well. It happened. The financial crisis. If you see the Big Short and all of that, I mean, people are making money, through leverage over in the end of the day, what was happening in the financial crisis? It was a collateral that was accepted as collateral. When it shouldn't have been accepted as collateral because the value was not what they said was it. And then there was a curation system called the risk, scoring companies that were certifying the collaterals that should not have been certified. And then this produces a very big meltdown with the difference that there is a lender of last resort that can actually save systemic failures in banks because the Federal Reserve had to bail out everyone for not to have a very big collapse of the world economy. I don't know. Someday what is going to happen is in crypto is that there's going to be one big DeFi. I mean, imagine Aave failing. This is Lehman Brothers. I mean, failing, right? And there is no way to save it then because there is no lender of last resort. So I don't know. We'll see.
We actually had, sorry for that, maybe we need to move on, but we actually had the Drift hack a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And then Tether entered the conversation, and they are basically being giving, I think, a convertible token that people can buy and to kind of finance that, and they
bailed them out
a little bit. Yes, a little bit.
Well, but
partially, but it's not crazy to think that something like that.
No, but this is perfect. This is perfect that you bring this up because this is what happened in the panics in the early 20th century, where you had, the tether of the financial industry was JP Morgan. JP Morgan, I mean, when John Pierpont, when the guy was alive, he saved the banks in the panic of 1906, I think, and 1907. There was a big panic, and there was no Federal Reserve. So what happened is that the largest bank bailed out all of the other banks, not because of generosity, just because, okay, if the financial industry goes, to shit, their own business would be affected, So they just were worrying about themselves. And the solution, what happened was that they ended up moving from a ad hoc system of bailing out through JP Morgan to a mechanism that is the Federal Reserve. Of course, who wants to propose producing a Federal Reserve for crypto where there is a mechanism that can be used for bailing out the failing DeFi protocols? It's a discussion that nobody will want to give, but this is if you want to follow the history of how the financial system was built in the early 20th century, the natural next step is moving from the ad hoc tether bailout to a mechanism that, I don't know, I'm not proposing that, but I'm just saying that, this is the symmetry seems to be perfect there.
That could be interesting. I will clip this part just
Yeah,
so we have this recording.
remove this part. I mean, never said that. This was my agent that was hallucinating. That's the problem with sending your agent to the calls. Yeah, but yeah, Fortunato, let's continue.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So Federico introduced Scout, which is one of the various applications of Curate, and probably as of today is the one with most interactions and most value. In short, Scout is about verifying smart contracts. We verify mainly the information related to smart contracts, so the website to which project is linked, and also one of the use cases is the CDN, that we match the smart contract with a specific domain, something that we analyzed the previous week with the CoSwap DNS attack. So as you can see, we share this information with several block explorers and wallets and various partners, but the question you may ask is why this information is important and why it is important made this way. The first reason is what Federico just mentioned, that I would say something related to scale. You need to verify such a large amount of assets that the standard regulators or even a single actor, one of these actors, cannot keep up with, or at least they cannot keep up with in a way like being enough strict, which is also related to the Brian Armstrong tweet from last year. The second reason, and I would like to bring you up a direct example of this, is that when you are browsing, in this case a block explorer, and you see that a smart contract has the information verified, you may wonder how this verification was carried out. To give to our listeners a parallel, imagine about social media. Social media, you have users that have a verification badge. So this verification badge means that the user has some sort of extra trust. But as a random person looking at that user, you may think, okay, how that user got that badge? Maybe they paid, some platform allowed it, or other platform simply do some, in-house closed door process to verify their users. So long story short,
Just one thing, I want to just mention something about this. I was offered like many times when Twitter was Twitter before being bought by Elon Musk to verify my account in exchange for X amount of money, because some inside employee of Twitter who control the badging process could offer that service, and we were offered that many times, like Kleros as a company and myself like as an individual. So this is how the badging process works in many places.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is also like a recurrent situation that I heard in past. Before there was this trend of paying for the badge, what you described, it was the norm. Like most of the people I knew who had a badge, they knew someone within the reference social media, that may be X, that may be Facebook. So it's a process that was shady and behind closed doors. And so to bring back the reason why this type of verification is important, is there are two main reasons. The first one is that you can see how the verification was carried. Like in this case, this Stargate credit messaging, you have the website link, you have the description of the project. You can see which address verified it, when it was verified, and on which chain, and you have the domain. And besides all of these informations, you can still eventually request to remove the item. So this is the first advantage. You know how the verification was carried out. The second advantage, which is strictly related to what Federico just mentioned, is that anyone can take part of this process in the same way. There is no delay. You don't have to rely on any centralized source. You have your own smart contract. You think you comply to the rules. In this case, to give you like a proper example, we display the requirements, guidelines properly. You think you comply to these rules, then you make your submission, and if you're accepted, you will be displayed as verified. So the advantage is both for the let's say in this case for the project that they want to be verified, but also for the user because they have a clear history of how this verification was carried out. One last thing that I wanted to add is that Scout is extremely popular and it is used for a smart contract, which is a verification, like traditional curate, which is the tool under the hood of Scout, is more like a stamp, right? You put a stamp on this smart contract that it's verified to comply to these rules at a given day. But let's bring back the initial topic, this Aave, let's call it attack, how Curate could have prevented this. I think few months ago, recently, we launched a new version of Curate, which is Stay Curate, where instead of the submitter going through a verification period of X days, of a certain amount of days, they stake a collateral permanently. So they pledge that their submission, whatever it is, will be compliant in time, through time. So how we could apply this in the Aave case? Let's say that KelpDAO or whoever wanted to add RS ETH, they were required to stake a bond via Stake Curate and certify that their asset RS ETH was safe and was well audited, and the bridge, which is what Juan was mentioning, was secure. And the one-to-one signing is not secure. They needed multiple independent verifiers for that bridge to be deemed as secure. So if there would have been Stake Curate, the issue, it's not like it would have been identified faster after the attack, but it would have been identified before the attack. And this would have happened because, for example, like here you have a bounty because users are continuously incentivized to monitor, because if they spot eventual, unsafe procedures on time, and if they are the first one flagging them, they would be rewarded. And if you remember earlier, Juan mentioned that this kind of in the not safe procedure was something that could have been changed at any given day by the DAO. So that's why in this case, Stake Curate could have been important, because you have that constant monitoring. And so, yeah, someone could have flagged that, and the RS ETH would have been, we could say, delisted before it would have caused any kind of damage. So yeah, this is how Stake Curate could have been used in the recent Aave, let's say, attack.
So what we're saying, I mean, if I have to explain this to Aunt Rosita from Tusukuatia, we could say that this is kind of a more transparent, decentralized, credit score, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, like a system where people can actually verify what's inside and see if the asset is as risky as they say or not.
Yes, exactly. You may think we can take the example of gold that you were making at the beginning of the call. In that case, imagine that gold always has a mark, like as a signature or a serial number, that you can see which foundry, which producer created that the kilo of gold, right? And let's say that in this case, the one buying gold is aware that there is a constant system monitoring the procedure of these factories creating gold bricks, and it is notified that one factory is not doing his, let's say, their process is not as pure as it should be. Maybe they are using low quality metals. So the one buying gold is immediately knows this is the serial number and says, okay, this serial number belongs to this factory that right now this factory is having problems with their production. Their production is not pure, so I cannot accept that gold as a collateral. So you are constantly informed if some, in this case, a DeFi protocol is doing their due diligence.
So if you were running Aave now, or you were part of the government, nobody runs Aave, I guess, but what would you, knowing this, what would you do? What would you suggest doing to improve the, risk profile of the protocol?
Well, I think I am a bit biased related to for this question, but yeah, it is hard to find some cons in the system we just explained, because it allows scaling. So we were saying that Aave is, betting on numbers. They want to have like a large number of accepted assets on their platform, which is perfectly fine. So, and this would be allowed by this system. And at the same time, having a protocol that allows you to have all of these assets, but at the same time, having a constant monitoring on them and having incentives in users flagging these not safe procedure related to protocols. If I should, focus on finding a potential flaw of this system, one could say, let's say that I'm one of the verifiers, and instead of taking the bounty, I still want to try and hack the platform. Even as an attacker, if I claim the bounty, I know 100% that I will get that because I'm right. I will have no problem. I will be able to use the bounty. If I am trying to attack and steal more, I know that, I may be hunted, my funds may be frozen, the attack may not be successful. They may find out of the attack early. So there are plenty of advantage if using a decentralized verification system. And, not just from Aave point of view, but you can also propose it to your users. You can tell to your user, look, we are listing these assets, and you can check how these assets are verified. So there are plenty of advantages.
I would say, maybe, I'm not saying this because of Aave. This could be to any, protocol that is doing DeFi. I think one of the, disadvantages of this approach is that sometimes it is too transparent. If you have protocols who want to list assets by their friends or by the partner projects, let's call it, and this system ends up claiming that those assets do not comply with the acceptable risk profiles, then you don't get to list them. So it's kind of it's the always existing thing of you want more yield, but okay, not the same level of risk. If you want more yield, but have more risk as well. So this makes transparent lots of processes that I think are not transparent. Neither in TradFi, maybe neither in DeFi, but the difference with TradFi is that since this was abused many times in the past, the government, that's stepping in and trying to put rules about conflict of interest and a lot of situations that they want to avoid. I mentioned before, the panic of 19. Let me tell you a bit about that because this is an interesting thing, and this is something that happens all the time in DeFi. The 1907 panic of Knickerbocker crisis was a financial crisis that took place in the US over a 3-week period starting in mid-October in the New York Stock Exchange. Suddenly, when the exchange fell 50% from its peak, like in 3 weeks from the previous year. Yeah, it was triggered by a failed attempt to corner the market on stock of the United Copper Company. When the bid failed, the bank that had lent money to the cornering scheme suffered runs that later spread to affiliated banks and trusts. So, people panicked, withdrew the money from the banks, and this is the thing. The panic might have deepened if not for the intervention of financier JP Morgan, who pledged large sums of his own money and convinced other New York bankers to do the same to shore up the banking system. And this crisis was what ended up, becoming, the reason why the Fed was created in 1913. I mean, do read about financial history because there's lots of learnings. And everything I just read, I mean, just replace the name of the banks by, DeFi projects and, financiers, by another financier, and it rhymes perfectly. So, no, this time is not different, unfortunately. So yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I have one comment about this. It's that one thing I know that these listing processes sometimes they take months, and there are people discussing, having meetings, adjusting things, changing the way the asset operates and things like that. So maybe one a way to start with that will just to have these lists to kind of be a way of pre-certifying, or maybe even create more granular parameters, because maybe to list a protocol you need all of the parameters to be okay, but it might be useful just to have a list that talks about the security of the bridges that the asset uses, or one that cares more about the liquidity and other things, the smart contract reviews or things like that, right? Maybe this is might be useful even for the protocols that are not listing the asset, and they maybe use them in some other way. Then there's that effect, Federico, that I always remember. That nobody got fired because they hired IBM. It's like
IBM, yeah.
Maybe at some point we can get to a point where you can say nobody got fired for trusting the lists of Kleros. So it's a new standard that people will need to fight against that friction, that inertia.
I mean, that is what we are trying to build. I mean, we're trying to build, this not just the system that works and is transparent, but also a system that is perceived as transparent and fair, where people can trust it to use it. And I mean, if we can make this work and people start adopting it, I mean, this I think can change finance forever, because it creates a system that is not going to be, I don't want to say not going to be infallible, because nothing is infallible, but I think it's going to be way better than existing centralized, black box kind of situations where you had a bunch of people. And if you saw The Big Short, you remember that scene where they go to the scoring company and there is this woman who tells them that she went to the eye doctor and she couldn't see anything very well. And that is a perfect metaphor of her not being able to see anything of the risk profile of the assets she was being presented with. So this is a way better eye doctor for detecting, non-compliant assets. And then, this only will ensure that the process is being conducted in a transparent way. Then, if you want to make rules for making to accept a very low value, low quality assets as your collateral, the system will just comply with the risk profile that you ask it to comply with, and then it will accept the buyer chain and whatever other things that maybe you wanted to accept. This is in the end the Kleros curation is going to focus on the process is done the right way, but then the content or the substance, that you can tweak as you want it, right? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I want to add is that this is general for Kleros ecosystem. Stake in court on Gnosis for curation. We have like plenty of cases. So if you also want to be a juror, you definitely should stake there. And there is like around, I think, 70% API right now. So also that is important because we have plenty of challenges with hundreds of items. So yeah, also that stake in court.
You can be part of this. Yeah, you can be part of making DeFi more transparent and safer, right? But that is the perfect way to end this segment of the call, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
Cool. Well, let's continue because this is already a very, very long. And let's have William here. We have been actually, this is very relevant because this is about DeFi. I mean, this week is DeFi week. Yeah, William. Hello. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well.
Awesome. Well, tell us what about the DeFi and Kleros, since we have been working a lot on this.
Yeah, I mean, topically, like we've been writing an article, together, you and me, Federico, and we also have like another co-author, is on how Kleros has all the things you've been discussing, the roles that Kleros has and can have in DeFi, a lot of these curation use cases, both providing mechanisms to strengthen DeFi sort of in advance through these curated mechanisms, curated collaterals and like lending protocols and such, and then also how it can be used after something goes wrong, in the more sort of traditional dispute resolution setting. So we're writing an article on that, or I guess a book chapter in an academic book, so people will be able to sort of read our broad overview of this soon, I hope.
Yeah, we just to tell a bit more to people. So this is a chapter for Edward Elgar. It's a really important publishing house, and we're writing about how Kleros can help secure the DeFi ecosystem. And it's a good opportunity for us to put together a number of different research things on experiments and pilots that we have done over the years. Curation, what I explained about Scout and Curate and a certification of assets, that's one part. Then distributed solution for Oracle situations prediction markets, decentralized insurance. That's another important aspect. And then also DAO governance, things like preventing attacks, governance attacks on protocols. So it was honestly. It was a great way, even for me and I'm sure for William as well, to kind of put in the same place all of the use cases of Kleros in the context of decentralized finance, securing, because we always were presenting this from different, fragmented ways, and I also learned a lot in the sense of how Kleros can have this two-sided approach to securing the ecosystem, in the sense of there is an ex-ante, a preventive approach. So everything we discussed today is about preventing bad things happening, in the sense that not having the wrong type of collateral in your protocol. And then the ex-post is when a dispute happens or something goes wrong, then we can have to resolve. Clean the shit, if you want to put it that way, and resolve it. But ideally, we can prevent things from happening. Anything else, William, you want to mention? Maybe you can mention a bit about the UK tour we will have in a few months and the places where we're going to present, so people who are based there can book their tickets, let's say.
Yeah, so I guess ultimately we're confirmed that we're giving sort of small colloquium style lectures at King's College and at the University of Edinburgh. Is that right? And then in the middle, sort of the main event is we have kind of a one-day conference at Oxford.
June 9 in the afternoon. If you want to go to Oxford, you have there's going to be two panels. One about Kleros and the law and the private governance tools and how this affects the future of arbitration. And the other one is about computer science and the type of research we're doing regarding, social choice theory and all of the things that, William researched. Okay, let's stop here because it's already super late. But thank you, William. And let's go to Lucia. And yeah, Lucia, in 1 minute, let's explain people what's going on with enterprise and the cases we have and all that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So regarding enterprise, as you know, with this new court, we have been receiving lots of cases from a municipality. And today we actually talk with the people from that municipality, and they told us that they are very happy with Kleros and that it really helps them like fasten their process. So we are very excited. Actually, we are looking for some new jurors to join this court, but this is a Spanish court, and I mean the jurors need to be lawyers. So if you know someone who wants to join, you can let us know.
Any kind of lawyer, or should it be like some particular knowledge? I mean, what type of lawyer
yes,
can apply?
I mean,
So you need Spanish. You need to have Spanish, right?
Yes. Ideally, Spanish. Also, have some experience related with consumer protection, and if you also have knowledge in Web3, I mean, it's something that it's a plus. But if not, then we can help you.
We can teach you.
Yes, we can help you become. I mean, with the onboarding and everything. And apart from that, maybe few weeks we are planning a webinar. I don't know if you already.
You can tell. I mean, people don't know, so if it's not secret, right? We can tell.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
I think so.
We can.
Yeah, you can tell. It's fine.
Very briefly. I mean, I will not spoil anything now, but we are planning a new webinar for maybe like in 3 weeks. So we will keep you updated about it, and it will be related with Kleros and the public sector here in Argentina. So that's very, very important. And I think that's 1 minute and a bit more.
Yeah, perfect.
Summary.
It was like a TikTok summary of everything in enterprise. So, I think the main thing is that, so in one particular call, we can go from the history of financial, crisis to dispute because you order like a cat food and they sent you dog food, and now you want to change it and they don't want because you opened the bag and now you have a big problem with the supplier, right? This is as flexible as Kleros gets. I don't know, Jean, do you have anything else for today? Considering it's
One thing, like since you mentioned that, we have been posting more content on Instagram and TikTok. And actually, Lucia is recording a couple of videos explaining some of these cases and Kleros Enterprise. And we are posting more consistently later and getting better results. But we need everyone to follow us and reshare the content because it really helps. Now it's a critical moment in our account. So please follow us and share. I'll share the links in the Telegram group.
Share everything that you see from Kleros. You just don't read it, just press like retweet, repost, or share, or whatever. That is the even better. You can put your agent. Put your agent do it. It's even more efficient. Okay. Okay. I guess that's it for today. I think this is the longest ever call. Jean, can we say that? I think it is probably right.
Live streamed once. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys, and I guess we will see you next week at 6 p.m. UTC. Thanks for coming. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, see you.